The first scream on the afternoon bus did not come from the girl. It came from the German Shepherd. The dog had been sitting quietly beside her, his ears relaxed and his head resting near her knee, until three young men stepped into the aisle and began laughing at them. One of them kicked the seat. Another grabbed the dog's leash. The third leaned close to the girl's face and sneered, "Cry for your daddy." The girl lowered her eyes. She looked frightened. She looked small. And that was exactly why the bullies made their biggest mistake. Because the shy woman sitting by the window was not helpless. She had spent years learning how to remain calm when everyone else was panicking. She had walked through places where one wrong movement could mean death. And the German Shepherd beside her was not merely a pet. His name was Kodiak. And his owner, 28-year-old Mara Veyne, was a United States Navy SEAL who had survived things she had never told anyone about. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can give people a second chance and that courage doesn't always look loud, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to people who need them. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon in the city, the kind of day when sunlight spilled between tall buildings and turned the bus windows gold. People were heading home from work, students were returning from classes, and the streets outside were crowded with cars, bicycles, and pedestrians. Mara sat alone near the middle of the bus, wearing faded jeans, a simple olive-green shirt, and a dark jacket folded across her lap. Her brown hair was tied loosely behind her head, and she kept her eyes on the passing streets. Kodiak sat beside her. The large German Shepherd was almost perfectly still. His black and tan coat shone under the afternoon sunlight, and his amber eyes quietly watched everything around him. Mara occasionally touched two fingers to his shoulder, a small habit that reassured both of them. Nobody on that bus knew where they had come from. Nobody knew that only a few months earlier, Mara had been stationed overseas. Nobody knew that she had lost friends there. Nobody knew that Kodiak had once pulled her out of a collapsed building after an explosion. And nobody knew that Mara had returned home carrying invisible wounds that were harder to heal than any physical injury. She had always been quiet, even before the military. After returning, she became quieter still. Crowds exhausted her. Sudden shouting made her heart race. She hated being the center of attention. She preferred sitting near windows and keeping her life simple. That afternoon, she was simply trying to get home. Three young men boarded at the next stop. Their names were Brent, Coulson, and Riker, though Mara did not know that yet. They were loud, careless, and full of the confidence that sometimes comes from believing nobody will challenge you. They laughed as they walked down the aisle, shoving each other and disturbing passengers. Then Brent noticed Kodiak. He stopped. He looked at the dog, then at Mara. A grin spread across his face. He whispered something to his friends, and they laughed. Mara immediately knew what was coming. She had learned long ago to recognize danger before it announced itself. Brent approached and stood directly in front of her. He asked if the dog was dangerous, but before Mara could answer, he reached down toward Kodiak's head. Kodiak moved slightly. Mara calmly placed a hand on his collar. She told the young man not to touch him. Her voice was quiet enough that several passengers probably didn't even hear it. Brent laughed. He mocked her soft voice and asked if she was always that scared. Mara looked out the window. She did not want trouble. She had spent too much of her life around trouble. But Brent wasn't interested in leaving her alone. He stepped closer and started making comments about her appearance, her silence, and the fact that she was traveling alone. His friends joined in. One sat across from her while the other leaned against the pole beside her. A few passengers looked uncomfortable. Nobody spoke. Mara felt the old pressure building in her chest. Not fear exactly. Something deeper. A memory. A hallway filled with smoke. A radio screaming with static. A friend calling her name. Then silence. She took a slow breath. Kodiak looked up at her. Mara whispered that everything was fine. It wasn't. Brent suddenly reached for Kodiak's leash. That was when the atmosphere changed. Kodiak immediately became alert. Mara's hand closed around the leash. She told Brent to let go. Instead, he pulled harder. The bus driver glanced into the mirror but continued driving. Brent laughed and said the dog belonged to him now. His friend Coulson picked up a wooden umbrella handle that had been left near a seat and waved it jokingly. Mara's eyes followed the movement. For 1 second, the entire bus disappeared. She wasn't seeing an umbrella. She was seeing a weapon. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She stood. Not quickly. Not dramatically. She simply stood. The three men stopped laughing. Mara was not particularly tall, but something about the way she stood changed the air around her. Her shoulders straightened. Her breathing became slow. Her eyes lifted. The frightened woman they had been teasing seemed to disappear. Brent told her to sit down. Mara didn't move. She calmly told him to release Kodiak's leash. He refused. Then he made the mistake that changed everything. He shoved Mara's shoulder. The bus went silent. Kodiak rose instantly, but Mara gave him one command. Stay. The dog froze. Every passenger saw it. The huge German Shepherd could have lunged. He didn't. He simply watched Mara. Brent smiled as if he had won. Then Mara looked directly at him. She told him that he had 3 seconds to step away from her and her dog. He laughed. He thought she was bluffing. He didn't know that Mara had spent years training herself to control fear, anger, adrenaline, and instinct. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to threaten him. Her calmness was more frightening than anger could ever be. Brent raised the wooden handle. Mara moved. It happened so quickly that most passengers couldn't understand what they had seen. She stepped aside, caught his wrist, redirected his balance, and sent the wooden handle sliding harmlessly across the floor. Brent stumbled against a seat. Coulson rushed forward. Mara turned, blocked his movement, and pushed him backward without striking him. Riker froze. The entire confrontation had lasted only seconds. Mara told them they were finished. No screaming. No insults. No unnecessary violence. Just certainty. The bus driver finally pulled over. Passengers began standing and moving away from the aisle. One elderly man near the front raised his phone and told the driver he had recorded everything. A teenage girl whispered that she had also called the police. The bullies suddenly looked much less confident. Brent tried to explain that Mara had attacked them. But then the driver pointed toward the security camera above the seats. Everyone knew the footage would tell the truth. As the bus waited at the curb, Mara sat down again. Her hands were trembling. That was the part nobody noticed. She had won the confrontation, but winning didn't erase what had happened inside her. Kodiak pressed his head against her leg. Mara closed her eyes. She whispered that she was okay. But Kodiak knew better. An older woman sitting across the aisle reached over and gently touched Mara's arm. She told her that she had been incredibly brave. Mara almost smiled. She said she hadn't felt brave. The woman answered that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Sometimes courage was simply refusing to let fear decide what you did next. Those words stayed with Mara. When the police arrived, the three bullies were questioned. The passengers gave statements. The video footage confirmed everything. One officer noticed Mara's unusual composure and asked if she had military experience. Mara hesitated. Then she quietly said she had served. The officer asked where. Mara simply answered that she had been a Navy SEAL. The officer stared at her. The passengers nearby heard the words. The bus became completely silent. The teenage girl who had called the police looked at Mara with wide eyes. Someone asked if she was serious. Mara nodded. She explained that she hadn't wanted anyone to know. She wasn't looking for attention. She had come home because she wanted a quieter life. Then she looked down at Kodiak. She explained that he had served alongside her in dangerous environments and had saved her life more than once. The older woman smiled through tears. She told Mara that perhaps the dog wasn't the only one who had saved someone. Mara looked at Kodiak. For the first time that afternoon, she smiled fully. The story could have ended there. But something happened before Mara left the bus. Brent, the loudest of the three bullies, was sitting alone while officers spoke with him. His arrogance had disappeared. He looked frightened and embarrassed. Mara walked past him. She could have ignored him. Instead, she stopped. She told him that what he had done was wrong, but that one terrible afternoon did not have to become his entire life. Brent looked at her. Mara said that strength wasn't about making weaker people afraid. Real strength was knowing you had power and choosing not to abuse it. Brent lowered his head. For the first time, he looked like a young man instead of a bully. Mara walked away. Outside, the afternoon sun was still shining. Cars moved through the intersection. People hurried along the sidewalks. The city had continued moving while a small battle had taken place inside one ordinary bus. Mara stood on the pavement with Kodiak beside her. She looked toward the sky and took a deep breath. For years, she had believed coming home meant forgetting. But that day taught her something different. Healing didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. It meant learning that the person you became while surviving difficult moments could still choose kindness afterward. Kodiak nudged her hand. She scratched behind his ears. Then they started walking home together. Not as a soldier and a service dog. Not as a victim and her protector. But simply as two survivors who had found their way back into the sunlight. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and scroll away. Like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that quiet people can be incredibly strong, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy for more emotional stories about courage, compassion, and second chances. And I have one special request before the story ends. Comment, "Stay strong," below if you believe true strength means protecting others without becoming cruel yourself. Because sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one making the most noise. Sometimes it's the quiet woman sitting by the window. Sometimes it's the loyal dog resting at her feet. And sometimes courage looks exactly like choosing kindness after you've already learned how cruel the world can be.